So now is a good time to talk about um, Jewish catastrophe, A, because we just underwent one, and B, because these are the 3 weeks before we commemorate the destruction of the temple on the 9th of Av. Um, let's talk about the Jewish response to catastrophe. And the Jewish response to catastrophe is survival. So the question is, how have we survived? And we've survived through being in conversation with each other around something that we consider sacred, our history, our texts, our books, all of the things that Judaism has bestowed, first of all, to the world, but to us. And what keeps us together is that common third object. That's why Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, when Beit Hillel wins, Beit Shammai does not form an opposition party because they both are preserving the same thing. Their argument is an argument l'shem shamayim, on account of heaven, meaning they both are, in their difference, faithful to the biblical text. So in that sense, three is less than two, because three unites into one. In the weeks before the 9th of Av, it's good to remember, well, the story of the destruction of Jerusalem. The second time is Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is the rabbinic leader in the city. There are others, extremists in the city, who want to fight to the death. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai makes a different choice, and his choice is a kind of symbolic death. He smuggled out of the city in a coffin. He goes to Yavna. Yavna is a place where he founds his yeshiva. And the first thing that they do is they canonize a set of sacred texts. This is the beginning of the oral law, where there's a movement, and this is what happens after the destruction of the temple, from temple sacrifice and ritual worship to interpretation as a form of dealing with catastrophe. Not interpretation, reading and writing, reading and writing. So they canonize certain texts become apocryphal. There's an argument about Song of Songs. There's an argument about Ecclesiastes. But what's important is the rabbis say there are these sacred texts, and we now, in becoming readers of this text, and there are lots and lots of rabbis, dozens, hundreds. So what's built into it is this idea that this infinite thing that is contracted or revealed by God, even in its contraction, we can't understand it fully. Meaning we'll always argue. This is the concession to history, and it's also a concession to poetry. Hilary Putnam, a famous philosopher, says enough may not be everything, but enough is enough. This is and hear it again, enough may not be everything, but enough is enough. Live by that quote in every sphere, because this striving for perfection for everything betrays the human, and it certainly betrays others. Poets admit that they can't understand the whole world. It doesn't mean, like people are so quick to say, that poets are relativists. No, we just say there is more to heaven and earth than is dreamt of in your philosophy, my dear Horatio. We just say that poetry, because it acknowledges its limitations, and it can't do everything. It's knowing the unknown, or understanding the unknown through something that is better known. So there is, in a metaphor, I'm trying to quote Aristotle, in a metaphor, there's my love is a red, red rose. Now, my love can't be fully embodied in this red rose, but it's partial. So there's always, in a metaphor, similarity, but also difference. And that difference is what gives it authority. Because when you claim to have everything, you have nothing. This is the condition of mourning. After the catastrophe of the fall of the temple, the oral law is born. And the oral law is all of the traditions, sacred works, achievements of our people. That's what it is today. And after catastrophe, we need a rebirth of poetry. I'm not saying go to your bookstore and buy a Sylvia Plath collection of poetry. You can if you want. A poetic way of being is when I make myself present to the other. This could be a person, but to a tradition. I make myself present to a tradition like Hillel and Shammai. I am dedicated to understanding that tradition. But I also understand that in the process of reading, I make it my own. That I'm bringing in the subject does not undermine the authority of the object, because I'm dedicated to understanding it. I would say this of Shakespeare as well. I'm dedicated to that understanding. That's when you become a good reader, when you acknowledge there are people in the world who are smarter than you are, and you make the leap of faith to understand instead of dismissing, and dismissing according to just, contemporary prejudices or whatever. So in a time of mourning, in the time of catastrophe, Jews become poets. They become creators, builders and creators. These words have been taken away from us by cynical people, by people who no longer feel connected to the mission, maybe with which they started. But we are a group of people who are, this is the amazing thing. We are committed to the Jewish people. We don't give up our skepticism. This is another kind of false belief that skepticism and belief are different. True belief is based upon skepticism, or has skepticism internal to it. Internal to it. If you're a cynic, it's external to it. But you can be in a relationship and ask questions. So the 3 weeks before the 9th of Av, think about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And there's an interesting midrash about him, that the Romans capture him and they put him in 7 rooms, dark, dark rooms, and they leave him there for days and weeks. But when he goes out, he knows exactly what they ask him inside. What time is it? What day is it? And he knows it exactly. There's a time to move into history. There's a time to move away from ritual worship to creativity. It's now.